Thank you so much for joining this webinar that is organized by UNECE together with Eurostat on the Joint Forest Sector Questionnaire. I'm joined by my colleague Melinda from Eurostat, and Melinda maybe can introduce herself in a second. I also want to thank Arvidas Leberis from FAO, who's also our partner on the Joint Forest Sector Questionnaire, who's joined us as well. Hi Arvidas, good to see you. My name is Daniel Griswold. I'm working with UNECE in Geneva. I will be moderating and doing some of the presentations today together with Melinda. I also want to welcome Holger Weimar from the Tunin Institute in Germany and Dr. Branko Glavonic from Serbia, who will be presenting case studies later on today. Melinda, would you like to say hello? I know you'll be speaking in a bit, but just to introduce yourself.
Yes, hello everybody. I'm Melinda Dosha from Eurostat Luxembourg. I've been working on the JFSQ for 4 years now, and I also handle the European forest accounts data collection. We have launched the data collection on the 22nd of April, and all European member state countries and EFTA countries are supposed to send me their data. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Melinda. So Melinda and I will be both presenting the introduction to the JFSQ. Today, there will be time for some discussion after the presentation. Just to give you an idea, this is an introductory webinar, so this is intended for a lot of the new focal points, but I think it's also quite useful. We've seen in the past for existing focal points as we go back through the Joint Forest Sector Questionnaire, which is the international data collection on forest products. It's the basis of what's published by Eurostat, UNECE, FAO, and the International Tropical Timber Organization as statistics. So I will go through the background on the JFSQ, the structure with Melinda, the product structure. Also, there's multiple questionnaires, so we'll walk through the different questionnaires and resources for completing the questionnaire. So this is a quite technical presentation at the beginning. Then we will move to case studies from Germany and Serbia on their data collection at the national level, which is used to complete the questionnaire. After the introduction and after each of the case studies, we will have a chance for questions and answers. So if you do have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Maybe you can have some exchange in the chat, introduce yourself, and we can also take questions if you'd like to come in and take the floor during the meeting. So with that, I will go forward with the introduction. So the Joint Forest Sector Questionnaire is managed by what we call the Intersecretariat Working Group on Forest Sector Statistics. So this is UNECE, FAO, Eurostat, and ITTO, the International Tropical Timber Organization. And when you complete the JFSQ, you will receive it from only one organization and you will send it to one organization, but the replies will be shared among the 4 organizations. The questionnaire is available in all of these languages that you see here. So you may receive it in one language, but if you would prefer in another, you can always ask for the other language copy. This year for UNECE and for Eurostat, the questionnaire was sent on 22 April, so last week. And this is not just the ECE deadline, this is the ECE and Eurostat deadline. There's a typo there. For replies this year is 12 June. The data collection by FAO and ITTO has different timelines. It's also different countries. Now, the structure of the JFSQ, there's from the UNECE side, 4 main questionnaires. We're actually going to see a few others today as well. The first one, which is we call it JQ1, so the Joint Questionnaire 1 is about removals of wood from the forest and production of primary products, so sawnwood, fiberboard, etc., pulp and paper. Then we have JQ2, which is a questionnaire on trade in forest products. So even if your country does not have removals, for example, you may have trade in wood products, and that would be reported here, and that structure matches the same products on JQ1. Then we have JQ3, which looks at trade in what we would call secondary products. So this could be things like furniture that are made from primary wood products. I'll be presenting ECE-EU, which is I think everyone on this call will be receiving. Maybe some of those who will listen to the recording, maybe if you're receiving it from FAO or ITTO, you will not see this questionnaire. This is about species trade, so we look at certain species that are traded, pine, fir, spruce, etc., for industrial roundwood and for sawnwood. Now, the way the questionnaire is structured is hierarchical. With ECE and with FAO, we have a bottom-up database. With Eurostat, it's a bit different, and I'll let Melinda maybe come in there when she takes the floor. But basically, we have, for example, a category like wood-based panels is split into plywood, particle board, and fiber board. Then plywood itself is split into coniferous plywood and non-coniferous plywood. So this is 8.1.C, 8.1.NC. Fiberboard is split into hardwood, MDF, so medium density fiberboard, and HDF, high density fiberboard, and then other. So if we want to calculate values in the JFSQ, the values of the lower level items normally will calculate up to equal the higher level. So fiberboard should equal hardboard plus MDF and HDF plus other fiberboard, and wood-based panels should equal plywood plus particle board and OSB plus fiberboard. There's one exception, which is if a product is called, it starts with of which. So for example, here we see laminated veneer lumber. This falls under plywood, but the sum of laminated veneer lumber will be either equal to or less than the value of plywood. So it will not add up to the value of plywood. And that is why it starts with of which. We have species groups, we have species groups. So when in our code is usually a number, but we have letters. C is for coniferous, NC is for non-coniferous. And then within the non-coniferous, we have a subcategory, which is tropical, which is again an of which category. So you have a JFSQ user manual that's prepared by UNECE each year, where we show the mathematical relationship between the different product codes. Here's a screenshot, but the full manual has all of the different product codes. And we also have detailed definitions available on our website, and in the questionnaire, there's a link to find both of these documents. So now that I've explained a little bit the logic of how the products relate to each other, I will start explaining the specific questionnaires, starting with JQ1. And then in a minute, Melinda will explain some of the questionnaires that you would receive from Eurostat and from ITTO. JQ1 covers removals of wood from the forest and production by volume. So we measure in either 1,000 cubic meters or in 1,000 metric tons. It depends on the product. This is including, as you can see here, roundwood, sawnwood, different kinds of panels, pulp and paper. When you look at roundwood, which is on the screen here, this is what's coming out of the forest. You can see wood fuel is split from industrial roundwood, for example, and we'll have a presentation today from Bronco on wood energy, so you may be able to see a little bit more about that as well. When we do data collection, the other point to highlight here, you'll see it in red, is that we collect 2 years at a time. This is a screenshot from a few years ago. So this year we're collecting data for 2024 and 2025. For each year that we collect data, there's a column to provide a statistical flag, which is where you can say if the data is official data, if it's estimated, for example, if it's repeated, and I'll come to those codes in a minute. And you have a column for notes if you want to explain something to the Secretariat when we review your data. When you do submit, this is for UNECE at least, for Eurostat it's a bit different. Please avoid submitting blank cells. because if it's blank, we don't know if it's 0 or if you just don't have data available or if it's confidential. So if you have no data available, we ask you to put 3 dots. If it's actually 0, we ask you to put 0. And if it's confidential data and you cannot provide it with a confidential data flag of code 6, you can put in plus. For Eurostat countries, when you submit to Eurostat, you will be submitting them with confidential data. UNECE and FAO are statistical systems. We do not publish confidential data, so some countries provide us with a plus, but you're also allowed to provide us with the confidential data, and we will replace it with either repeated data or with an estimate. If you are submitting official data, you don't actually need to fill in the flag of the status code. You can leave it blank and we will consider it official data. If you are repeating data, you might use a status code of a 5. But if you repeat data in your national submission, we will change the flag to a national estimate. We will not put it as repeated because in our system, repeated means it was repeated by the Secretariat. If you provide a status code of 6 for a specific data point, it means we should not publish it and it will not be published. And if you provide a status code 9, it means it's a national estimate. So it's not official data, but maybe you have an estimated data point. This is why we collect 2 years at a time. Sometimes for 1 year, the more recent year, you only have estimates. That's fine. And we will keep this flag as a national estimate in our database and when we publish. The notes that you provide to us will not be published. Sometimes we get notes from countries and it looks like they're intended to be made public, but that's not how it works. But it is used by the Secretariat because we do review your submissions when we're doing checks to see if the data is consistent. If there's inconsistencies, we might make an estimate unless we see a note that explains it. For example, you might have problems in the data that you're aware of that you think we will see. You might have negative apparent consumption and you may have an explanation for it. If you do, let us know in your notes and we will understand that data, for example. We also have some checks when you are preparing your replies. So when you fill out the questionnaire, for example, we want to make sure that, as I said before, the lower level products in the aggregation hierarchy are consistent with the higher level. So here's a check that you can see here in the questionnaire that looks for discrepancies. So if under 1.1.c, you have a value of 5, and under 1.1.nc, you have a value of 5, and your value for 1.1 is not equal to 10, then that would flag a discrepancy. So please do check these before you submit, or else we will have to come back to you. This is the JQ2 structure. Colleagues, if you could please mute. And JQ2 is a bit more complicated than JQ1. It has more columns. So you can see that here I've only pasted the screenshot with the 8 columns requesting data. So for each of the 2 years for the data collection, we're requesting import data and export data. And we are requesting both quantities and values. In addition to the 8 data columns here, you will have further to the right off what you see on the screen here, you will have 8 columns for statistical flags where you can indicate repeated data, estimated data, for example, and you will have another 8 columns where you can include notes. The products that you see here are the same products as you will see on JQ1. We have a little bit less detail on industrial roundwood, but otherwise they will match. When you submit your reply, you have to specify what currency you use. In most cases, this will be national currency. We have a number of countries that also submit in US dollars, but please be sure to submit with the currency that you're using for reporting. And please be sure to check the quantity. Here in the screenshot, you see cubic meters under bark. 1,000 cubic meters under bark. In some products, we have 1,000 metric tons. Here I added attention to this footnote on tropical species. So while our countries may not be producing a lot of tropical wood in this region, you are requested to check your bilateral trade and include species that are exported by tropical countries or imported from tropical countries. So there's a number of codes that I'll come to later on that track trade in tropical species, but you may also have other species that are not listed as tropical but are coming from tropical countries, and those should be included here as well. This applies in different parts of the questionnaire, so it's applicable to roundwood, as you see here. It's also applicable to sawnwood, veneer, and wood-based panels on this questionnaire JQ2 and on the questionnaire ITTO1. We have another check that can help you to see if there's any inconsistencies in your data. Once you've completed all of JQ1 and JQ2, you should be able to see this. It should be filled out automatically. It looks at how much industrial roundwood you have available. So this is how much you are importing minus how much you are exporting, plus how much you are removing nationally. And it compares whether that is sufficient to produce what you're reporting in production. And this can show if there's any inconsistencies there, that either you're missing something in your statistics on production or potentially on roundwood removals or trade. JQ3 is another questionnaire focused on trade, but as I said, it's on secondary wood products. So these are made from the primary wood products on JQ2. This only requests values. It does not request quantities, so values, monetary values. It's in 1,000, either USD or 1,000 of national currency, euro, or what have you. Again, you can see the flags, the statistical flags, and the notes columns to the right. And much of this data you can pull from the customs data. Finally, before I hand over to Melinda, we have the ECE EU questionnaire. This is not used by countries that receive the questionnaire from FAO or ITTO, but is used for all Eurostat countries and all countries that receive from UNECE. It's asking for species level data on imports and exports of roundwood and sawnwood. Only countries reporting to Eurostat should complete the cells shaded in blue. So UNECE countries only need to complete the cells in white. And again, it's reported in 1,000 cubic meters and in 1,000 national currency units. And with that, I'll hand over to Melinda for the next questionnaire.
Yes, thank you, Daniel. So EU countries and EFTA countries will receive 3 more sheets in the Excel. The first one will be removals over bark. But before I start with this, in the Excel, we also have a sheet for guidelines. Please have a look at it. We list the flags that can be used or the different notations. But coming back to this, Daniel mentioned we have it a bit differently concerning empty cells. Yes, if a cell is empty, we assume that data is not available. But even if you use the 3 dots or the 3 pluses, I will understand, so no problem. But have a look at this guideline. I update it every year, and that's everything is clearly written. So removals over bark, we ask for roundwood removals over bark in 1,000 cubic meters. And as you see, we have a check table on the right and a table calculating conversion factors in the bottom. Calculated conversion factors are just to make sure that overbark data are larger than underbark data. it's basically it's also a quick check. The check on the right is simply checks that some subcategories add up to the totals. And to illustrate this, I introduced some dummy data because this is happens very often. So whenever you have an error in the check table listed in red, very often it's just due to rounding. But still, it will appear as an error. So if you record 10.1, maybe you don't see the numbers clearly, but I just talk it through. So you record 10.1 for coniferous and 10.1 for non-coniferous. This adds up to 20.2. But if you record a rounded value into total industrial roundwood, a rounded value of 20, you will receive an error. And here I ask you to correct this. Either you record also the total as with 1 decimal, or you leave the decimals. If you don't do it, you will get this error. You will get the same error in the validation report. And if the error is really small, I very often I do it myself. I just correct the values, which I shouldn't, because data that we receive from countries are like the holy script, so I really shouldn't touch it. But if it's of something really small issue, we are allowed to round. We do round the figures up to 2 decimals. So I just very often I just correct it. But if I do it, I have to document it, and then all this documentation will stay with us forever. So it's unnecessary administration, and that's why I ask you, and it's easier if you correct it yourselves. These check tables you will have in each of the sheets. So sums are checked in all of the sheets. So please scroll a bit to the right and see whether you have a red error sign, and if yes, usually it's just because of rounding, and then please see to it. Also, if I do it, I very often correct it on the level of industrial roundwood, but it might introduce another error on the level of total roundwood, and then if I have to correct several cells, then I just don't want to do it. It's just too much administration, and then in the end I will send back it to you to do it anyway. Okay, the next sheet that goes only for EU countries is about extra EU trade. Here you have imports and exports, both by volume and both by value. Concerning value, record it in your national currency, which is either euro or not. Now I just spotted a line in the sheet which says Eurozone countries may use the old national currency, but only in both years. It's a remnant from previous years. No, always use your actual national currency. This is interesting this year for Bulgaria, who switched to euro as of 1st of January. And we already agreed with Bulgaria that even though euro is in use only this year, they will report all the trade data in euro, both for 2024 and 2025. It's of course, it's very important that both the same currency is used for both years. Here we ask data for roundwood, sawnwood, and primary products, panels, pulp, and paper. You have the possibility to include flags and notes. Notes, again, as Daniel already said, can be very useful if, for example, there's a high rise, because the validation report will spot it, will highlight it, send it to me, send it to you. Is the data okay, or what happened? And if we have a note there, then it will not be highlighted, so you will not get it. As many of you already know that we have a lot of records in the validation report, so it's always useful to to give as many information as you can so that validation becomes easier. Okay, then, and the third sheet. No, I I want to briefly come to the checks concerning the extra EU trade. On the right side, you see the usual check for totals. On the left side, you see an extra check where we compare extra EU trade figures with total trade figures. For total trade, that was the JQ2 table explained by Daniel. It has the same structure and has data for total trade. Here we have data for extra EU trade. It's interesting only for EU member states, so not for the EFTA countries. And we compare that extra EU trade should be smaller than total EU trade, logically. Again, here, it's quite common that we have an error where extra EU trade is higher or higher. It can also be the result of a revision. So if you revise any trade figure or extra EU trade figure, please double check that the other trade figure is also aligned. Okay. And then coming to the third sheet, it considers removals by type of ownership. It's a very small table like what you see now, and it covers removals by volume by these the listed type of ownerships. Very often I have notes from countries saying that private forests include other publicly owned forests. No problem. I ask you to flag private forest data as with a definition differs flag, or just put it in the note that definition differs because private forests include other publicly owned forests, and then you leave the cells empty for other publicly owned forests. You don't have data. Yes, and you have the usual checks for totals. So these three tables are sent only to Eurostat countries. And we have three more tables in the questionnaire, which are sent to all countries. These are tables for the ITTO, the International Tropical Timber Organization, which means we collect the data, but they are the main users of the data. Nevertheless, some parts are interesting also for us. The first sheet considers estimates for this year, for 2026, production and trade estimates for certain items. And trade is recorded both in quantity and value. The second ITTO sheet asks for detailed list of the major tropical species traded in each category. You can also give the local name of the timber species, both for import and export, quantity and volume. And the third ITTO sheet is the one which can be interesting also for us. Here you have simple questions, so we don't ask for figures, but I really encourage all Eurostat countries and UNEC countries to answer these questions, especially towards the bottom. We have questions about the economic environment in forestry, like whether you have trade incentives or the extent of foreign involvement in timber sector, eventual trends in the domestic building activity, or a question about forest plantations. So this could be interesting also for us as a part of metadata to everything that you that you report otherwise. Okay, then one small remark about revisions. We very often receive revisions, and sometimes it's a pain, and I have to admit there is no perfect solution, but just let's go through how usually it's done, and if you can relate to this, I'd be grateful to discuss with you what could be the best options. So if you want to revise one or two data points only, we ask you to send, in any case, a full questionnaire. So it's not really possible that, I mean, technically it would be possible that I go into the database and just rewrite one data point. But because of keeping record of these changes, basically it would lead to many more problems in the future. It would be very difficult to keep track of what data point was changed when. So Eurostat, as an institute, we have the policy that we treat full questionnaires as one atomic unit of data. So even if you just want to update one data point, I ask you to send a full questionnaire with the updated data point. It always helps, of course, if you highlight it with yellow background or whatever, you make it clear which data point was updated. But the problem is which questionnaire to use. So this is an example here. If you want to revise 1 point for 2020, which was far away in the past, which questionnaire you would use, the JFSQ for 2020 or for 2021. If you use the first one for 2020, then you have data for 2 years there for 2019, which is the final data. So it's okay, you leave it untouched. And then you have data for 2020, which is provisional. So if you update one data point there, all the rest will still not be the final. And then you have to update the whole year for 2020 plus the one data point that you had. Or you can use the JFSQ for 2021. There you have the final data for 2020. It's good, you update only one data point, highlight with yellow, but then you would send me again the provisional data for 2021, which would not be good if I uploaded it, and then everything for 2021 would be overwritten with provisional data. So then you would have to revise the whole data set for 2021. So in both cases, it's a lot of manual work, I understand. But still, I'd like to draw your attention that you have to do it. Or there is another option. If you use any of the two above, but let's say you use JFSQ for 2021, revise only the data points for 2020, and then I ask you to delete all the data for 2021. Because if I see that the whole data set for 2021 is empty, you definitely did not want to delete all the data for 2021 in the system. Because if I just upload the questionnaire, normally everything would be overwritten actually. So if you leave it empty, but now since last year we introduced a new process. So if the whole set is empty, then it will not be. It's taken as it will not be touched. So this is also a way to send a revision. So in all three cases, you have to really pay attention and do a bit of manual work. But I ask you to do it. This is the only way to be precise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melinda. I think That was a lot of detailed technical information, and I'm going to share some resources that you may also use when preparing the replies, but I want to pause here because maybe there are technical questions on how to complete the questionnaires based on what we have already covered. So I'll pause for a minute, and then after that, I will go through some resources and we will come to case studies on national collection. If you'd like to ask a question, please feel free to raise your hand. Holger, please come on in.
Yep, thank you, Daniel and Melinda, for the great presentations. I have actually two questions. One is for you, Daniel, and one for you, Melinda. The flagging is one question. So about the flag number 9. Number 9 is defined as an estimate. Yes. Let's say we when preparing the JFSQ, we do a lot of estimates, national estimates. And I was wondering, what is official data and when do I have to fill in an estimate? Is an estimate if we estimate it, or is official only if it comes from national statistical offices, or is it official if the data doesn't change anymore and will be fixed for the next years?
Yeah, that's there's a number of dimensions to that. I think the first one to clarify is that we automatically assume in the metadata that when we publish that the most recent year is provisional. So even if you don't flag it, it will be considered provisional. We also automatically assume that it becomes official if it's not changed in the second year that you report. So this is going to be the second time you report 2024 this year. If the data does not change, it's considered official on our side, unless you specifically flag it as a national estimate.
Okay, so it doesn't mean that it's an estimate from our side, but that it's somehow provisional.
Yeah, I mean, provisional is versus
Okay.
estimate is a finer point. In terms of whether it's official data, I mean, I think you have a very specific case because you are checking very carefully what is published by the Statistics Institute. But normally that would be your decision whether to flag it as official or an estimate.
Okay, thank you.
From our side, I don't know, Melinda, if it's different for you.
It's absolutely the same. So if we consider provisional data can only be provisional for 1 year, after the first year, the P flags will be deleted automatically. So basically the approach is the same.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And then my question to you, Melinda, if I may. For revisions, what shall we do if we have revisions of longer time series for a specific product?
Well, in ideal case, I would ask you to send me full questionnaires for a long time back. In your case, I know you did it for really historic years. It was okay the way you sent me the data. Either I prepare the questionnaires then myself using the available data, because I prefer it for keeping track and record of all the changes. So if after 30 years somebody comes and checks the data, these prepared questionnaires will be there. So it will be clear when was updated, which data point. But in special cases, so Germany revised data for a certain product for 10 years back, then it's okay if you send me an Excel file and we will find an exceptional way, a one-off procedure within Eurostat. And then it will be, I mean, otherwise it would be just too much work for both of us. So
yeah,
yes, there are exceptional cases. Yeah.
Okay. 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 Good to hear. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Holger, for the question. I don't see any other questions. We can also, if you want, we'll have more time at the end. I would suggest that we move then back to Holger who will be presenting a case study from Germany on how he is preparing the data for the questionnaire. After this, we will have a chance for questions for Holger, and then we will have a presentation from Dr. Glavonic from Serbia. Holger, do you want to share your screen?
Yes, I'm going to share my screen right now. So should work right now. Okay, thank you for the invitation and giving me the opportunity to present you how we collect data on JQ1 production, case study for Germany. So I will focus here on JQ1 production, meaning the products, the production of the products, not on the removals. Give you some insights on how we approach this and what kind of databases we use. On the left-hand side, you can see the structure of the actual JQ1 on production. Somehow some sub-items are deleted here to put it on the screen. You see the structure, and I would like to give you some basic information on our data and data background. So as a first point, in Germany, we are using all available information which is accessible on domestic production, which is various official national statistics, not only one production statistic, but also other. Statistics from industry associations are very important and very good information. We use scientific studies on specific products. Also, we use reports from newspapers and the web for the JFSQ, and we need to do own estimates and use other experts' information for preparing the JFSQ. Important is that the quality of the information on different products varies really a lot, and there is always need to verify also official statistics. The official statistics may contain double counting if similar products, for example, are covered in a production step. For example, if you have sawn wood and it's rough or planed, there can be double countings in statistics, and or if you have panels, for example, then they are on the one hand coated, and there's a production code and a raw and the raw product production code. Then you have to take this into account to avoid double counting of the quantities which are produced in the country. And of course, official statistics may have confidentiality issues or cut-off thresholds for some products, so that not everything is covered, what should be covered in the JFSQ. I'd like to give you some let's say smaller examples on how we figure out what production we had in Germany for some products here. On wood charcoal, for example, we have no data on production available because there are too few producers. So we use a fixed value based on expert knowledge from our environmental agency. We had discussions and decided on a fixed value. For recovered post-consumer wood, for example, there is not really data available or not valid data available from official statistics. So here we use results from scientific studies for the domestic production. On wood pellets, which is item 5, wood pellets, briquettes, and other agglomerates, as well as wood pulp, other pulp, recovered paper, and paperboard. The official statistics, as far as we know, are only partly valid. And here, luckily, we can use data from industry associations. They form the basis for our reporting. And honestly, to say for glulam, CLT, and I-beams, which are on now new products on the bottom of the JQ1, the official statistics in our case are really not valid or not available. And here we use data from a newspaper, which have quite a good database. So it's a broad range of information we can use and we do use for the reporting. On the next slide, I would like to give you one very specific example on the fiberboard and how we proceed here, because fiberboard is a quite important product and produced in many production sites in Germany. What you can see here is the official production data from the statistical office we have in Germany. You can see that there are many statistical codes here describing a lot of different kinds of fibers differentiated by thickness or by density or by kind of product, meaning MDF or HDF or so-called other fiberboard. And then you can see here, let's say the information of the statistical office. There is information on production in cubic meters and sales in cubic meters, and also the companies who reported. But of course, there are some questions we have and some issues we have with this data here. For example, if you see the question mark 1 here, of course, confidential data, because there are too few companies who are producing this, confidential data are problematic. On the second point, we have an issue with double counting. You can see this here. The description is more or less the same. It's MDF up greater than 9 millimeters and in the density of 650 to 800. And on the one, and this code, it's rough or sanded. And on the next code, it's other, which means coated or laminated. And we have different production figures here. And it's not sure if we can combine this kind of information, or what is the production of the rough material, for example, of the rough panels is. So it's not really clear out of this information we have here from official statistics. And also sometimes it's not clear how to allocate these codes to the JFSQ codes. So what is other fiberboard? Is this really non-MDF, HDF, and another different fiberboard? We know in Germany that we don't have any kind of wet process fiberboard production. So, but what can it be here? So this is a question, and we have to decide here. And then we have one code which is provided in tons, and we have to convert it into cubic meters, which this is the product of panels made of wood polymers. And then we see here that the data on LDF is missing for German production. So we have here 4 production sites, but no, because of confidentiality issues, no figures are provided here. So this is also a big problem, as this is a quite emerging product. Anyhow, we can draw up some sums here. You can see here on the table below. On the left-hand side, you can see a combination of production figures and sales. And on the right-hand side, only the sales of the companies. And you can see here a range of the production in Germany. Let's say, luckily, this is only one kind of information we have in Germany, and we can compare different data. For example, this is what we just saw. This is based on production statistics we have in Germany. Then we can make a specific query at the statistical office to ask only for the aggregates of the JFSQ products. But only here, this in last year's only helps a little because of confidential issues. The statistical office is not allowed to report any kind of these also aggregated products. So this does not really help. And once more, luckily, we also have another data source, which are empirical surveys we are conducting on our task of the wood resource monitoring, where we ask the panel producers how much they produce. And based on these empirical surveys and also using some tiny models, we have these kind of production figures for MDF, HDF, and other fiberboard, including LDF. So after a long, let's say, years of discussion, we decided to go now for the reporting with our data from the wood resource monitoring. In this case, plus the fiberboards made of wood polymers. And so in the end, we have these results for 2024 for the JFSQ reporting, 3.9 million cubic meters, which is, let's say, in the range of the other data, at least of the aggregates of the single production codes. But still, it's really a task, and we try to improve this system we have here. Yeah, and with this, I'd like to summarize and conclude a little. So basically, it's important to get an understanding of the branches in your country. If possible, use various sources for your JFSQ data, and do not necessarily take data from official statistics or sources for granted. Or, of course, also not of any other database, and review all possible data sources and try to discuss your results with colleagues and other experts. And of course, sometimes it is just guesswork. And with that, thank you for your attention. And I'll hand back to you, Daniel.
Thank you so much, Holger. This is a fascinating, I think, example that you've chosen. So thank you so much. I think it lays out a lot of the complexities. I think it's also important to highlight how many years you have worked to develop many of your models. So different countries at different points of participating in the JFSQ. We have some here who are new to the JFSQ today. This is something that takes time to build up, and we do encourage you to report with the available data that you have. We will then highlight inconsistencies, and as you start to see inconsistencies and look at why you have inconsistencies, you can refine your data collection methods and identify where this can be strengthened, as Holger has shown he's done in Germany. I want to pause here for questions and then go to Branko. I've pushed my overview of resources until after Branko's presentation because I know some of you may need to drop off. But I do want to give a chance for any questions to Holger before we go on. If you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand. If not, in the interest of time, I will then bring up the slides for Branko, who will be presenting on. He's worked over, I think, 15 years. Is that correct, Branko, on developing the wood energy data monitoring in Serbia? So it's quite an interesting example. Again, this is something that doesn't happen from one year to the next, but I think it's useful to see how it's been done. So Branko, please.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. It is my great pleasure to participate in today's webinar. As you know, my name is Branko Glavinić. I'm professor at University of Belgrade Faculty of Forestry. I also serve as Serbia's national correspondent for cooperation with FAO and UNSA Timber Section on forest products and wood energy statistics. Over the next 15 minutes, I will present the key aspects of the system for collecting, processing, and publishing statistical data on wood energy that we have developed in Serbia, and I will share our experiences with you. The next slide, Daniel, please. This is the contents of my presentation. At the beginning, I will introduce how the system of wood energy statistics has been developed in Serbia. Then I will present the approach and methodology for collecting and publishing data on wood energy in Serbia. And finally, I will discuss the main users of our data. Next slide, please. Wood energy statistics in Serbia have significantly improved over the last 15 years, primarily thanks to the support of FAO and UNEC Timber Section. This progress began with the implementation on the first Wisdom project in Serbia in 2010. The key results of this project showed that the production and consumption of fuel wood were several times higher than the officially reported figures. In fact, fuel wood production was 5.6 times higher than the officially recorded level. Next, please. In the Wisdom project in Serbia, a methodological concept was applied for the first time, according to which fuel wood production was calculated using the following formula. Production equals consumption plus export minus import. Why was this approach chosen? There were two main reasons. First, Serbia has a large number of private forest owners, over 800,000, and it was not possible to obtain reliable data on their forest harvesting activities. The share of private forest in Serbia was 48% in 2010 and exceeded 57% in 2024. The second reason was the many households obtain fuel wood from areas outside forest, and these quantities are not statistically recorded. In Serbia, we identified it through the Wisdom project that 1.45 million cubic meters of fuel wood comes from outside forest, representing 23% of total consumption. To determine fuel wood production, we used a survey-based approach to collect data on consumption and then calculated production using the mentioned formula. Data on imports and export were obtained from the statistical office. For the purposes of the survey, we used a stratified sample representing 5% of the total number of households that use solid fuels for heating. The procedure used to determine the number of such households is shown in the figure on the left. We started with the total number of households in Serbia according to the census and subtracted those using district heating, gas, electricity, and oil. The figure on the right shows the sample size by district in Serbia. The sample size depends on the number of households using solid fuels for heating. Next slide, please. An important characteristics of fuel consumption for heating households is the fact that a lot of fuel combinations are present in the consumption. Results of the survey showed that in heating season 2010-2011, 28 different fuel combinations were present. It should be mentioned that the combination wood and wood coal had the highest participation, while other fuel combinations were present to a smaller degree. The figure on the right shows the share of individuals' fuel and their combination by districts in Serbia. The next, please. The next big project that was implemented in Serbia focused on the consumption of all types of energy in households in Serbia in 2020. The project was realized in 2021 with the support of the Energy Community Secretariat for Southeast Europe. The next, please. The key results of this project is that 48% of households in Serbia use wood fuels for heating purposes. This clearly indicates the importance of wood fuels, especially fuel wood, for the population of Serbia. Next, please. The last project that was completed at the end of March of 2023 is the inventory of wood energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions from wood fuels in Serbia, supported by FAO. In addition to the inventory of wood fuel consumption, the project aimed to calculate greenhouse gas emissions from wood with different moisture content. A methodology for calculating greenhouse gas emissions from wood with different moisture contents was applied for the first time. Next, please. Yeah, now I would like to briefly introduce you to how we obtained the data for the Joint Wood Energy Inquiry for Serbia. This slide shows the process of data collection and production. It contains the following phases. First, data collection from various sources, data quality and logical control, then data processing in Excel through implementation of different conversion factors and formulas for summing, multiplying, dividing, and linking of cells in order to get the final data. The next, please. The main strengths of the data collecting process for Joint Wood Energy Inquiry for Serbia are professional and trained staff. It is very important for our success. Trustable relationship with producers and traders and individual institutions. Also, production data is collected directly from producers. Trade data are collected directly from official statistics. Next, please. Yeah, we have a small team working on data collection every day. In Serbia, there are close to 500 stakeholders that need to be proceeds in terms of obtaining data. The work is done by a small team that is very trained in data collection and analysis. The team has been working on these jobs for more than 10 years. Their training is the key to our success in the wood fuel data production process. Next, please. This slide shows our network and data sources for all types of wood fuels. Our network contains close to 500 producers, consumers, and traders of wood fuels. They are sources of primary data related to the production of wood fuels, consumption of raw materials for production, consumption of wood fuels, prices, distributions of wood fuels, export and import. The next slide, please. The data collection, processing, and validation process uses a methodologically based on the UNSC and FAO reporting principles. The main instrument in this methodologically are questionnaires, conversion factors, average prices, wood fiber balance, trends, and different statistical models. For each category of wood fuels, we created an appropriate questionnaire. With these questionnaires, we get basis data from producers, traders, and consumers. The next, please. This is an example of one of the questionnaires we sent to wood pellets producers. From them, we received data on the wood pellets production and consumption of certain types of woody biomass. As you can see, this questionnaire is very simple. Our experience shows that the questionnaires must be simple and clear because people in business don't have much time and they don't want to work with us if we send them a complicated questionnaire. It is a very important element of our success in developing cooperation with them. The next, please. Yeah, this is an example of one of the questionnaires we sent to consumers in district heating systems. From them, we receive data on consumption of certain types of wood fuels and the prices at which they purchase them. We created similar questionnaires for other categories of consumers in the segment of public facilities such as schools, hospitals, healthcare centers, local self-government facilities, kindergartens, and other consumers. The next, please. Yeah. When we receive data from producers and consumers, they are checked before being entered into the database. This control is performed through the following steps: logical control, cross-sectoral analysis, following their trends from previous years, and data correction when necessary. The cross-sectional analysis is a very important element as it confirms the validity of the data we received from producers. For example, we collect data on the consumption of wood chips from heating plants, industry, and public and commercial facilities. And when these figures are added together, they should approximately match the production data reported by producers after subtracting export and adding imports. The next, please. After the data control is completed, they are entered into the database. Data processing is done in the Excel database through the implementation of different conversion factors and formulas for summing, multiplying, dividing, and linking of cells in order to get the final data. The next, please. Yeah, who are our main consumers? Wood energy data is used by a huge number of different categories of users, domestic and international. The most visible system for disseminating wood energy data are UNEC and FAO publications like Forest Product Annual Market Review and FAO Forest Product Database. The next, please. This slide shows the key categories of users of wood energy statistics in Serbia. The main users are staff from the ministries and agencies, academy, chambers and producers association, domestic producers and traders, international organization, domestic and international consumers, consultants, and journalists. I could talk about these categories of users for a very long time. However, I will focus on journalists. Next, please. We managed to develop a very good cooperation with the media. Journalists in Serbia are very interested in the state of the wood fuel market in Serbia. In the last several years, we have conducted numerous interviews for TV, radio, internet portals, and print media in Serbia. This slide shows one example from the beginning of April this year. Serbia's public broadcaster regulatory publisher, our data and forecast on the market of wood fuels in Serbia 2 or 3 times per year. Our cooperation with journalists are very, very important for our position and promotion of wood fuels market in Serbia. Thank you for your attention. If you have any question, I'm available to answer.
Thank you so much, Branko. This is really interesting to see how you've developed such a systemic approach over the years that's really working quite well. I was wondering if there are any questions for Branko at this point, and then after the round of questions, I know we're over time already. If you're interested, I will then go back to the resources, but for those who are familiar, you can hop off the call. So any questions for Branko? I think it was very clear. You can tell you're a professor. You're very good at explaining things. Okay, so I will then, this will be the last segment before we conclude this webinar, and there will be one last round of questions in case you have them after this part. Let me just check. I see my screen flashing. Okay, no questions, or is there something in the chat? Okay. So we have a number of resources for you when you're preparing the JFSQ. I will go through them very quickly now. I think it'll be easier for you to see them in more detail later. This is what we provide from the UNECE side. As you heard, Melinda also has guidelines that she shares with countries when completing the Eurostat version of the questionnaire. The UNECE manual is linked. If you are receiving from us, we provide a link to the manual. If you're not, you can also find this on our website. It talks about how to complete the JFSQ, part of what you heard from me earlier. The product structure, the standard symbols like ... and +++, and we highlight the changes this year. We also have conversion factors in case you have data available at the national level in units that are not the same as the units we ask you to use in the JFSQ. And for all countries, we have classifications available in the annex of the JFSQ questionnaire. This is so that you can pull from other standard sources and convert into JFSQ format. We have also a list of tropical countries and territories for JFSQ reporting when you're checking if data is tropical, if wood is tropical, for example, for some of the products, per the footnote that I shared earlier. And then we have product definitions. So every single product has a definition, which is provided in a separate file that is shared with the JFSQ. I won't go through this in detail. It's just to show on the left, you have the product codes, and then you have many, many columns of conversion factors. The columns on the left-hand side here with the darker blue color are the most recent studies to convert, for example, from cubic meters into metric tons for different products. We have these by regions of Europe, North America, and Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and the Caucasus. We don't have every single product in this most recent publication. We have most, but we do have some other older publications in some cases. So that would be the orange on the right. The orange also looked at whether the wood is green or whether it is seasoned, for example. So this may be useful for you if you want to look at the moisture content. And sandwiched in between them, you see only gray here, but if you scroll down, we have a more specific source of conversion factors for engineered wood products. These can help you if you need to convert units, so you can refer to them, but we do always prefer that you use national conversion factors if you can. You may have more information than we do. This is international factors, so it's an average. In terms of updates for this year, the data structure, so the products and their hierarchy has not changed. Neither have the columns that we're collecting. There's one main change, which is a change to specify that laminate flooring should be reported under code 13.4, and it should be excluded from code 8.3. So we saw in Holger's presentation that he excluded laminate flooring, which if he had not done so would have kind of been much an order of magnitude larger than what he reported under fiberboard. And this is an important difference because, and you can see the change to definition. So this yellow text was added here to specify that fiberboard excludes laminate flooring and to specify that builder's joinery and carpentry includes laminate flooring coverings. Laminate floor also has a very different pricing point than fiberboard wood, so it's very important to split this out. Other kind of finer details that were updated. So in Annex 5, we have now added, with thanks to Melinda, 2-digit country codes from ISO to the list of tropical countries. There's been a few errors that were reported in some of the checks, and those have been corrected. And there is an update of the definition of pallets in the Spanish translation. Last year, we requested as a one-off for countries to provide metadata. This is requested by the IWG. It's proposed by FAO. And this year, it worked. Went well last year. It was quite useful, and so this year we have integrated it as something that we will include each year in the questionnaire. Maybe it will not change from year to year, but we do ask you to check it. And particularly this year, the questionnaire has been updated. So if you replied last year, we do ask you to look at it again this year, and then in the future to update it as appropriate. And this is useful for us to interpret the data. So we do, it's not so much work, and it does help us a lot. Likewise, we have a quality assessment and feedback that we will be asking for each year. It's also quite simple. It also helps us to understand how much time, things like that, this is taking, so we can understand the reporting burden. And there's always a balance that we try to find between covering new products, having enough detail, and not making it too difficult at the same time. So this feedback is very useful for the IWG. And we already saw the case studies. I want to just highlight, maybe I could go back for some of the new countries because I didn't have a screenshot of it, but in Annex 2 and 3, you can see the trade codes. So the harmonized system of the World Customs Organization trade codes are standardized globally. And if you want to report trade data for the JFSQ and you don't have a national source, or you want to compare against your national source, you can go to UN Comtrade's website, and they have trade data that's reported internationally by customs offices. You may also check both the trade reported by your customs office, but you can also check it as mirror trades. So you see what other countries report receiving from you as imports on their side, which would be exports from your country, and what they report exporting to you, which would be imports to your country. So we do encourage you to check that. The IWG has worked over at least 15 years to harmonize the customs codes with almost all of the definitions in the JFSQ. There's a few cases where customs codes do not match the JFSQ definition, and you have to see if what you report, but in most cases they do match. So I do encourage you to check that as well. And with that, with a big thank you to Holger and to Branko and Melinda, I want to also thank you for your time today and your questions, and open the floor for any questions or comments before we close. I think it's been a lot of dense material, but also quite interesting case studies. So very dense explanation of the questionnaire structure, but very interesting case studies today. If you do have questions as you look into the questionnaires after today, maybe some will emerge once you try to apply what we've covered. Please do feel free to reach out to me. You have my email here with any technical questions, and I'd be happy to exchange and answer any questions that you may have. Melinda, do you want to have anything else before we wrap up?
No, I just also would like to thank you, Daniel, for preparing all this, and also to encourage you to come back to me with questions, or if you have any problems with submitting the data through our famous EDAMIS platform or whatever, just write to me.
Thank you so much, Melinda. And also, I know that today we're recording, so you may also have questions you prefer not to share on the recording. So do follow up with us afterwards if that's the case. Mm-hmm. So thanks again, Melinda. Thank you so much, Branko and Holger, and thank you to everyone who joined today. And I wish you all a pleasant rest of your day, be it afternoon, evening. I saw we have from Central Asia. Thank you for joining so late. and morning for those of you in North America.